Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The day the first eye blinked open in my sanctuary was the day the world fractured. But the true architecture of the nightmare, its chilling dimensions, only revealed themselves when spectral words began to ghost across my television screen. My name is Ilara. 3 months prior, I was simply a textile artist, 28 years woven into the fabric of existence, inhabiting a sun-drenched loft in Boston's sprawling tapestry. I cherished my refuge, the rough kiss of brick walls, cathedral windows swallowing light whole, perfect for the intricate dance of thread and loom. A haven of quietude stitched into the city's vibrant pulse. It began with banal domesticity. Cleaning the bathroom, my fingers groped behind the porcelain throne for a fallen cotton ball, brushing against something small, alien, adhered to the tank's cool ceramic. Curiosity piqued, I detached it. A minuscule black disc, scarcely larger than a coat button, glinting with a single cyclopean lens. A shard of ice lodged itself beneath my ribs. A camera. Here, in my most private space. Denial fluttered first. A moth against glass. Perhaps a relic of the previous tenant, but a frantic, escalating search unearthed more. One nestled deep within the soil of a terracotta potted fern in my bedroom. Another masquerading as a screwhead in the kitchen's overhead light fixture. Each discovery churned a fresh wave of bile. The police were summoned, naturally. They arrived, their presence filling the space oddly, took notes with practiced detachment, bagged the tiny spies. Sympathy was offered, thin as gauze, but solutions were absent. These incidents, they're increasing, miss, one officer murmured, his gaze drifting past me. We'll file a report, open an investigation, but without tangible leads. The unspoken hung heavy in the air. Don't expect resolution. I stood alone on the precipice. The ensuing weeks dissolved into a blur of hypervigilance and fractured sleep. A security firm swept the apartment, their equipment probing corners I hadn't considered, unearthing 3 more silent observers I'd overlooked. Locks were replaced, tumblers clicking with unnerving finality. A state-of-the-art alarm system was installed, its sensors like new, unwanted nerve endings. Privacy film clouded the grand windows, muting the beloved light. Yet the sensation persisted, a phantom touch on the back of my neck. Entering any room became an exercise in frantic ocular sweeps, hunting for the telltale gleam. Friends were kept at bay. The shame and fear a gag prevent an explanation for my sudden aversion to noise, my insistence on hushed tones within my own walls. Then, roughly a month after the initial violation, it escalated. I was immersed in the late-night rhythm of warping my loom when the television screen abruptly flared to life, unsolicited. Blackness reigned, but then stark white letters materialized, typing themselves into existence. Hello, Ilara. Did you imagine barriers could truly keep me out? I became stone, my pulse a frantic drummer against my ribs, echoing in the sudden silence. A fever dream, surely. Yet the glow was undeniably real. More text crawled forth. I see you, Ilara. I have always seen you, and I always will. My hand, trembling violently, wrestled the plug from the wall socket. Darkness reclaimed the screen, but not the room. Eyes, unseen but palpable, remained. That night found me curled in the driver's seat of my car, parked under the relentless fluorescence of a 24-hour grocery store lot, the only place that felt remotely anonymous. The following day, I returned to the police station. Another report filed, more promises offered, but their eyes held a familiar skepticism. Without the phantom message captured, I was just a voice spinning tales of escalating dread. I attempted to stitch normalcy back together. Commissions awaited, clients needed placating, but the feeling of being perpetually observed clung like damp wool. Anomalies surfaced. A cushion subtly repositioned on the sofa upon my return, as if bearing a recent imprint. Digital files accessed on my laptop by unseen hands. And the messages persisted, sometimes flickering across the inert TV screen, sometimes materializing on my computer monitor. Intimate, invasive pronouncements. The crimson wrap suits your shoulders, Ilara, though I find the sapphire thread more compelling. Working so late into the night? Remember your sleep. Your sister sounded strained on the phone today. Perhaps a visit is overdue. Each typed word was a needle prick to the soul, reinforcing the terrifying transparency of my existence. My laptop use dwindled to bare necessity. The television remained shrouded beneath a heavy quilt. I began changing clothes inside the cramped confines of my closet, the one space seemingly devoid of suspicious corners. Friends' concerned glances registered my transformation. The weight loss, the bruised hollows beneath my eyes carved by sleeplessness. How could I articulate this? How to convey that my life had become a script penned by an unseen, malevolent voyeur? 2 months deep, the final thread snapped. A message bloomed on my phone. A device meticulously vetted, purged, deemed secure. You cannot hide from me, Ilara. I am always with you. Always. Something fractured within me. With a strangled cry, I hurled the phone against the exposed brick, finding grim satisfaction in the splintering impact. Then, a frenzy seized me. Curtains were torn from their rods, floorboards pried loose with desperate fingers, holes punched into the plaster walls. If more eyes existed, I would gouge them out. Hours later, my beautiful loft lay ravaged, choked in dust and debris. My hands bled, raw from clawing through wood and drywall, and I had found nothing. Not a single lens. Standing amidst the wreckage, a devastating counter-narrative began to dawn. What if the cameras were gone? What if the lingering surveillance, the messages? What if they originated not from without, but from within? The thought was almost more terrifying than the tangible threat. If my own mind was the architect of this prison, where could I possibly flee? I collapsed onto the debris-strewn floor, body racked with sobs that tore through the silence. I don't know how long I remained there, adrift in the ruins of my sanctuary, but eventually an unnerving calm descended, a clarity absent for months. I rose, wiped the grime and tears from my face, and began, inexplicably, to tidy the chaos. As I worked, a decision solidified. This existence was unsustainable. Whether the Watcher was real or spectral, I needed anchoring. The next morning, I walked into a psychiatric hospital. I unspooled the entire tangled narrative, the cameras, the digital hauntings, the suffocating certainty of being watched. The clinicians listened, their faces unreadable but not unkind, offering the prospect of untangling reality from the traumatic echoes and stress-induced phantoms. That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I slept soundly. The room was sterile, impersonal, yet it felt profoundly safer than my violated loft. 3 weeks have now passed within these quiet walls. The diagnosis names the beast, a confluence of PTSD and paranoid delusions sparked by the undeniable trauma of the initial discoveries. We are working painstakingly through therapy and medication, attempting to reweave the frayed edges of my perception. Some days remain shadowed. The urge to scan corners, to hunt for hidden lenses, still flickers. But I am learning to challenge these impulses, to tether myself to the concrete reality of the present moment. I cannot say if true security will ever feel attainable again, or if the full truth behind the planted cameras and the spectral messages, were they real intrusions or projections of a fractured psyche, will ever surface. But I navigate forward, day by careful day. My loft remains a wounded space, my artistic endeavors suspended, yet a fragile luminescence, like dawn after a long storm, touches the horizon. I am reclaiming myself, fragment by fragment. The most resonant lesson learned in this crucible. Sometimes the gravest threats are not external invasions. Sometimes the most insidious traps are those constructed by our own minds. Yet, with support, with resilience, pathways out of even the most labyrinthine darkness can be found. Here, in this quiet room, gazing out at the cityscape, I make a silent vow. Fear will not be my warden. Unseen watchers, real or imagined, will not dictate the terms of my peace. I will rebuild. I will mend. I will reclaim the right to my own unobserved existence. Because ultimately, the most critical gaze is the one turned inward. How we perceive ourselves and the strength we unearth to confront the shadows within. A hammering fist on the cabin door tore through the night, yanking Elias from a shallow sleep. His heart kicked against his ribs like a trapped bird. Outside, lightning flared, a silent, blinding strobe that momentarily bleached the rustic interior, revealing shadows that writhed like living things. He'd sought refuge in this high, lonely place, a bulwark against the city's ceaseless hum. The irony wasn't lost as another concussion of thunder vibrated through the floorboards. A week he'd been here, cocooned in quiet, and now this, the storm's first real onslaught, a deluge clawing at the shingles with torrential spite. The rapping came again, sharper, needled with desperation. "Hello?" A voice, thin and nearly devoured by the wind's howl. "Please, anybody, I need help." Hesitation coiled in his gut. His hand hovered near the deadbolt. Fragments of cautionary tales, whispers of isolated horrors flickered through his mind. Yet, the raw plea, Could he leave someone to the mercy of this elemental rage? Drawing a breath that felt thin in the charged air, he turned the knob. She stood on the threshold, a figure sculpted by rain and misery, shivering uncontrollably. Dark hair clung like seaweed to her face, framing eyes wide with a primal fear. "Oh, thank heavens," she breathed, the words chattering through clenched teeth. "I was afraid no one." "Inside," Elias urged, stepping back. "Quickly, you're soaked through." She stumbled past him, a gust of wind and rain chasing her in before he wrestled the door shut against the storm's fury. Closer now, he saw the youth beneath the grime and exhaustion, perhaps mid-20s. Her clothes were ripped, smeared with mud, and a raw, angry scratch marred one cheekbone. "Thank you," she managed, arms wrapped tight around herself. "I truly didn't think anyone lived this far out." Hope was fading. He fetched a thick wool blanket from the worn sofa, draping it over her trembling shoulders. "What happened? How did you get caught out here in this?" Her gaze darted around the small cabin, quick and furtive, as if assessing unseen threats before she clutched the blanket tighter. "It's complicated. I hardly know where to start." "A name might be a beginning," Elias suggested, keeping his tone level, calm. A pause then. "Lyra, my name is Lyra." "Elias," he offered in return. "Look, Lyra, you're safe for now. Sit down. I'll put some water on for tea. Then you can tell me what's brought you here." She nodded, a flicker of gratitude in her exhausted eyes, and sank onto the sofa's edge. Elias moved to the kitchenette alcove, the small space suddenly feeling crowded. As the kettle began its low hiss, he found himself stealing glances at her. She flinched at every thunderclap, every rattle of the window frames. When he handed her the steaming mug, her chilled fingers enveloped it as if it were salvation itself. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can't imagine how much." He took the armchair opposite, allowing her space. "So, Lyra, the middle of nowhere, the worst storm of the season. What circumstances led you here?" She sipped the tea, a small wince crossing her features. "I was running," she said finally, her voice barely audible above the wind's mournful cry. "Running? From what?" Elias leaned forward slightly, caught despite himself. Lyra's eyes met his, and the fear pooled there was deep, chilling him more profoundly than the storm's breath seeping through the walls. "From someone who means to harm me. Very dangerous." A different kind of cold prickled his skin. "Are you in trouble? Should I try to reach the authorities?" Her head snapped up, shaking vehemently. "No, please, no police. They won't help. They could be involved with him." Warning bells chimed faintly in the back of his mind. This felt like wading into deep, treacherous water. Still, the storm raged, and she was here. "Who is this person, Lyra?" he asked, softening his voice. She placed the mug carefully on the floor, her hands visibly unsteady. "My ex. He isn't the person I thought. I discovered things he was doing, illegal, terrible things, when I confronted him. Her fingers drifted unconsciously to the scratch on her cheek. A pulse of protective anger flared in Elias. "He did that to you?" Lyra nodded, tears finally welling, silver tracks on her mud-streaked face. "I got away, barely, but he's been hunting me. Days I've been moving, trying to disappear. I thought I'd given him the slip, but then his car. I saw it on the mountain road below. I just panicked, ran straight into the woods. Then the storm broke." His thoughts raced, connecting grim possibilities. If her story held true, the danger wasn't just hers anymore. "Do you think he knows you came here?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice frail. "I pray not, but he's always found me before." Elias rose, moving towards the window, peering into the maelstrom. Visibility was nil, a churning wall of gray and black beyond the porch light's feeble halo. An unseen watcher could be yards away. "We should be secure enough for tonight," he said, injecting a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "This weather's too severe for any effective search. Morning will bring clearer skies, clearer options." Relief washed over Lyra's face, smoothing some of the tension. "Thank you, Elias. Truly. If you hadn't opened that door—" He managed a semblance of a reassuring smile. "Try and rest. The bedroom's yours. I'll stay out here. Keep an ear out." She looked momentarily as if she might argue, but bone-deep weariness seemed to settle the matter. He showed her to the small spare room, found her some dry clothes he kept for emergencies, then settled onto the sofa himself, the wool blanket now seeming insufficient against the night's chill. Sleep remained elusive. Every groan in the cabin settling, every skittering branch against the glass jolted him alert. Lyra's narrative played and replayed in his mind, fraying at the edges. He wanted to accept it, to be the haven she needed, yet a persistent, nagging dissonance hummed beneath the surface. As the hours bled towards dawn, the storm's fury gradually spent itself, replaced by a dripping quiet. In that relative silence, the inconsistencies in her story grew louder in his thoughts. That scratch. It looked scabbed, older than a fresh injury from a recent confrontation. And her boots drying by the hearth, surprisingly free of the deep mud one would expect after fleeing through storm-soaked woods. Just as the first gray light began to filter through the windows, he heard movement from the bedroom. Lyra emerged, looking remarkably composed for someone who'd supposedly endured days of flight, capped by a night of terror. "Morning," she offered, a tentative smile touching her lips. "Anything?" He shook his head. "Quiet. Storm's moved on. We should be able to get down to town soon. Find someone who can really help." A strange flicker, alarm, crossed her features before being smoothed away. "I don't know if that's wise. He could be watching the road." "Lyra," Elias began, choosing his words with care. "I think you need to tell me what's actually going on. Who are you really running from?" She held his gaze for a long beat, and then the mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated. The fear evaporated, replaced by an unnerving, cool calculation. "You're sharper than you seem," she said, her voice shedding its tremor like a snake sheds skin. Most men get caught up in playing the rescuer. They forget to look closely. He felt his muscles tense, the isolation of the cabin suddenly pressing in on him. What is this really about, Lyra? She sighed, a gesture not of weariness but of mild impatience, running a hand through her now drying hair. The truth. I'm not running from anyone in the way you imagine. I'm transporting something sought after. I just needed a quiet place to weather a different kind of storm until things cooled off. His mind struggled to reconcile this with the shivering figure from the night before. So, last night, all of it? Not all a lie, she conceded with a dismissive shrug. My ex is indeed looking for me, but believe me, Elias, he's not the one you'd need to worry about in this equation. Just then, the low growl of an engine drifted through the newly washed air, steadily growing louder. Lyra's head snapped towards the sound and a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. Ah, my transport. She stood, moving towards the door with newfound purpose. Thanks for the shelter, Elias. You were quite literally a lifesaver. Before he could formulate a response, she was out the door, moving with swift confidence towards a dark, heavy SUV that had materialized at the edge of the tree line. He watched, frozen in disbelief, as she climbed in without a backward glance. The vehicle executed a tight turn and disappeared down the track, its engine noise fading rapidly. Elias stood alone on the porch, the damp, clean scent of the post-storm morning filling his lungs. Sunlight finally pierced the retreating clouds, dappling the wet trees. He saw now how perilously close he'd skirted the edge of a danger far more insidious than any tempest. He had opened his door to the night, offered sanctuary, and had nearly become collateral damage in a story he'd never truly understood. What Lyra carried, or who precisely sought her, remained mysteries shrouded in the night's receding shadows. But the encounter left an indelible mark, a chilling reminder that in the vast, silent wildernesses, both external and internal, the most dangerous predators often wear the most convincing disguises, armed not with claws but with a well-told story and a desperate plea for help. The daily grind pulls down its shutters sharp at 9:45 p.m., a quarter hour before Professor Thorne concludes his intricate weave through the pathways of cognitive psychology. Through the library's expansive glass, Ilara watched the baristas perform their closing rites, wiping down gleaming steel counters. Another night, then, navigating the walk home unarmored by her customary caffeine infusion. Night classes offered intimacy. Smaller circles of students, prime parking real estate. Their price? Everything else, particularly now in late autumn, when dusk draped itself over the city like a velvet shroud before the clock even struck 6. Her apartment lay a manageable distance away, 20 minutes tracing the main arteries, 15 if she dared the lacework of residential side streets. Tonight, though, a peculiar inertia held her at the building's threshold. Was it the unusual hush blanketing the campus air? Or perhaps the way the sodium lamps lining the paths seemed to burn with a subdued, almost reluctant glow. Her classmates scattered, phantoms melting towards the concrete tiers of the parking garage, while Alara cinched the straps of her backpack, a familiar weight settling before the familiar journey. 10 minutes unfolded uneventfully, tracing the well-worn groove of her routine these past months, 3 nights a week, skirting the austere lines of the chemistry building, looping around the slumbering student center, passing through the wrought iron campus gates. The darkened panes of the daily grind threw back a solitary, fleeting reflection as she passed. Just as she prepared to veer onto Willow Lane, her usual shortcut, a flicker of movement snagged her attention. Across the street, perhaps 30 feet behind, 2 figures ambled. Something in their gait, a languid deliberateness ill-suited to the hour, arrested her. She pressed onward, yet her stride instinctively lengthened. A disquieting echo followed, the sound of their footsteps, a counterpoint to her own, subtly accelerating to match her quickened rhythm. A cold tide rose in her chest as she registered them angling across the asphalt, closing the distance. Don't panic, it's paranoia. They live here. The internal mantra felt thin against the rising pulse. A backward glance confirmed it. They were closer, their movement imbued with undeniable purpose. One towered, gaunt. The other, shorter, radiated a dense muscularity. Both wore dark attire, faces obscured within the deep hoods of their sweatshirts. Her phone felt slick in her suddenly damp palm. She raised it to her ear, feigning conversation. "Hey," she began, her voice a surprisingly steady island in the turbulent sea of her heartbeat. "Yeah, nearly there. 5 minutes tops. You're still outside?" Silence answered, but the footsteps behind her didn't falter. If anything, their tempo increased. Options pinwheeled through her mind. Willow Lane, the swiftest path, was a tunnel of dim lighting and shadowed student rentals, mostly deserted during the term break. The main road beckoned, adding 10 minutes but offering... What? A passing car swept its headlights across the scene, momentarily etching the men's faces from the gloom. Their focus was absolute, unnervingly fixed on her. No conversation passed between them. No casual glances betrayed the ordinary pedestrian. Just watching, following, closing in. The decision crystallized in an instant. Forsaking the turn onto Willow Lane, she forged straight ahead toward the brighter beacon of the intersection glimmering further down. Behind her, a low curse escaped one of them, shearing through the quiet. Subtlety was abandoned. Their pace sharpened, escalating from a walk to something nearer a run. Her fingers trembled, fumbling with her phone, map application blooming on the screen, alternate routes. And then a memory surfaced. Mrs. Gable, her neighbor, describing the intricate network of alleyways spiderwebbing behind the old houses. Her dog-walking shortcuts, she'd called them, capillaries connecting the neighborhood. Just ahead, nestled between a shuttered independent bookstore and another cafe, yawned the mouth of the first alley. Security lights cast stark, geometric patterns down the narrow passage. Without a second thought, she plunged into it, her walk fracturing into a determined jog. The alley spilled into a small brick-lined courtyard before branching, trident-like. Right fork, another right, left. Behind her, the pursuer's footfalls caromed off the brickwork, echoing with a new note of confusion, of thwarted expectation. This wasn't in their script. Ahead, she recognized it, Mrs. Gable's garden wall, a cascade of dormant climbing roses silhouetted against the faint sky glow. Another left turn, then straight, aiming for the promise of Chestnut Avenue. Her lungs burned, a sharp protest against the exertion, but adrenaline was a potent fuel. The pursuing footsteps grew fainter now, more distant, losing ground in the labyrinth. A motion sensor floodlight flared as she passed a darkened house, momentarily blinding her. As her vision cleared, she saw it. The alley's end, 50 feet away. Beyond lay the comforting thrum of Chestnut Avenue, headlights streaking past, the murmur of pedestrians. She burst from the narrow confines onto the main thoroughfare, nearly cannoning into a group of students heading toward the glow of the 24-hour diner. Hands reached out, steadying her. "Are you okay?" When the breathless words being followed tumbled out, they closed ranks instantly, a protective constellation guiding her toward the diner's warmth while one dialed campus safety. Inside, enveloped by the bright clamor, the aroma of stale coffee and frying onions, her hands finally ceased their trembling. Campus safety officers materialized quickly, their presence solid and reassuring. They took her statement, escorted her the remaining blocks home. Later, they reported finding no trace of the men in the warren of alleys, but patrols were visibly increased. The following day became an exercise in cartography. Alara meticulously mapped every conceivable route between campus and home, highlighting well-lit avenues, zones of activity, the unblinking eyes of security cameras. Crucially, she charted the alley network Mrs. Gable had unknowingly gifted her, photographing each entrance, each exit, transforming abstract knowledge into tangible armor. News traveled. Mrs. Gable, hearing Alara's story, galvanized the neighborhood. More motion-activated lights bloomed in the alleys. A phone tree materialized for students walking late. Small green lights began appearing on porches, beacons signifying sanctuary, help available here. Her classmates, too, rallied. Walking groups coalesced, schedules synchronized. Location sharing apps became standard practice. Professor Thorne, subtly acknowledging the shift, began concluding his lectures 5 minutes earlier, allowing a collective departure while the daily grind's lights still burned. The incident rippled outwards, prompting institutional change. Extended shuttle hours, new routes weaving through residential streets, emergency call boxes sprouting along common paths, a dedicated safety escort program for night students. The most profound alteration, however, occurred within Alara herself. She still attended night classes, still trod the familiar pavements, but her steps held a different cadence now. Aware, prepared, fortified by the intimate knowledge of her surroundings, escape routes etched in her mind's eye. A personal alarm resided in her pocket. Self-defense classes became a weekly ritual. Fear hadn't vanished, but it no longer dictated her movements. It informed them. Last week, when a new student in psychology voiced anxieties about the late walk home, Alara didn't recount her terror. Instead, she unfolded her map of safe passages. She introduced the newcomer to the walk-in collective, pointed out Mrs. Gable's network of green lights. She spoke of the alleyways, not as corridors of dread, but as potential conduits to safety, if navigated with wisdom. because that was the lesson learned under duress that autumn night. Safety wasn't merely the absence of danger, it was cartography and instinct, community and connection. Sometimes the deepest shadows forge the strongest bonds, transforming dark alleys into illuminated paths and strangers into guardians. The security monitor flickered, its cool light bathing my face, but it was the anomaly within its digital frame, a fluid darkness slipping across the sculpture hall that sent a jolt through me, a frantic drum against my ribs. A blink, a second look. Had fatigue conjured phantoms? The corridor stretched vacant now, the smear of movement gone. My shift, barely begun, already felt frayed at the edges. A deep breath, a muttered dismissal. A glitch, surely. And the weight of the flashlight felt reassuring in my palm. Still, a knot tightened low in my gut, a premonition I couldn't simply will away. Mine is the solitary vigil of the night guardian in this repository of ages. 6 months I've paced these shadowed corridors, a lone sentry amidst relics. The museum sprawls, wings dedicated to canvases dreaming forgotten colors, archaeological fragments whispering of dust and empires, fragile manuscripts holding brittle histories, and the vast echoing expanse devoted to sculpted forms. Each night, the ritual repeats. The patrol, the camera scan, the rattle of keys and locks. Usually, only the drone of climate control and the slap of my own soles on polished tile break the profound stillness. But a month now, the silence has felt porous. It commenced with whispers of sound, phantom footfalls. Deep within the sculpture wing, my flashlight beam would carve arcs across marble expanses, illuminating the towering stillness of statues. I moved deliberately, verifying secured doors, checking the silent sentinels of the alarm sensors. Then, the faintest echo, steps just behind me. Not heavy treads, but delicate pressures, like slippered feet on stone. They ricocheted off distant walls, defying location. A swift turn revealed nothing but vacant air and impassive stone. A pause, breath held captive in my chest, yielded only silence. I'd move on, dismissing it, my own echoes amplified in the cavernous space. Yet the phenomenon persisted, grew bolder. One night, they encircled me. I stood near a corner plinth, examining the base of a forgotten deity for any disturbance, when the distinct tap-tap sounded to my right. I pivoted, the flashlight beam slashing across rows of marble figures. Empty. Stillness. Then the steps manifested to my left. A swivel of my head, and another patter sounded directly behind. A tremor started in my hands, the cone of light dancing erratically on the walls. Each time I thought I'd pinpointed the source, silence fell. A game of auditory hide-and-seek. My throat constricted. A weight settled on my chest. I forced myself to remain rooted for a long moment before retreating, the excuse of checking the monitors a thin shield against rising panic. On the screens, the halls lay inert, utterly devoid of motion. A fool's errand, I thought, blushing in the empty room, yet the frantic pulse beneath my skin refused to subside. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the regulated chill. Settling noises, air ducts, rational explanations felt flimsy against the memory of those distinct, deliberate steps. Another time, it was footprints. The floors, buffed to a mirror sheen each dawn by a meticulous cleaning crew, betrayed an anomaly. Nearing the Roman bust exhibit, my light snagged on them. Dusty outlines leading from the main entryway toward the room's heart. Smaller than my heavy boots, their size ambiguous, not childish, yet not substantial. Crouching, I traced their path with the beam. They simply ceased a few yards in, as if their owner had ascended vertically or dissolved into the air. I swept the light around, probing beneath display cases, behind pedestals. Nothing stirred. That familiar prickle crawled up my neck, the sensation of being observed. A glance over my shoulder met the impassive gaze of ancient Romans, their marble eyes blank under the low nocturnal lighting. They always possessed a certain unsettling quality after dark, but tonight, had that one, the stern-faced patrician, not been facing forward? Now, its head seemed canted slightly, angled toward me. I froze, bathing it in the direct glare of my flashlight. The sculpted expression remained unchanged, lips perpetually parted in stoic antiquity, yet the feeling persisted. An urge to flee warred with duty. I approached, cautiously touching the cool stone. Solid. No sign of recent adjustment, no note on the label indicating repositioning. My arms trembled slightly, my breathing grew shallow. Imagination. I chided myself, forcing my feet toward the next gallery. Later, a faint scraping noise drew me toward the Greek statues. Life-sized figures poised on tall plinths, capturing mythological moments in eternal stone. Hearing the sound, a dry skitter, I advanced down the colonnade, beam playing low across the floor. Near the base of one pedestal, a Heracles perhaps mid-feet, lay tiny flakes of stone, like granulated sugar. Kneeling, I rubbed them between my fingertips. Gritty. My gaze traveled up the statue. Its powerful arms were raised, suggesting a now absent weapon. I scanned its form meticulously. No obvious chip, no fresh break. The figure appeared intact, yet, again, that subtle dissonance. The head, tilted slightly skyward, seemed fractionally altered in its alignment. I backed away slowly, flashlight clutched like a talisman, heart hammering against my ribs. That same night found me back in the security hub, scrutinizing the camera feeds. Nothing explained the scraping. I rubbed tired eyes, zoomed in on the Hellenic gallery. Stillness reigned. Rising, I paced the small room, took a lukewarm gulp of coffee, listening. A sudden thud echoed from afar. I jumped, the ceramic mug rattling as I slammed it onto the desk. Flashlight snatched, I eased into the corridor, the metallic taste of adrenaline sharp in my mouth. The sound originated from the sculpture wing. I moved with practiced quiet, my own steps suddenly deafening. Reaching the threshold, I peered around the corner. Dim overheads cast long, distorted shadows, transforming familiar shapes into lurking grotesques. The Heracles stood to the left, seemingly unchanged, yet radiating that unnerving sense of awareness. Inhaling deeply, I strained to listen over the frantic thumping in my ears, and then I heard it. Soft respiration, undeniably close, directly behind me. I spun, flashlight beam wavering violently. Nothing. The corridor stretched empty. Gooseflesh prickled my skin. A wave of icy cold washed over me. The sound had been a quick, sharp exhale. A curse escaped my lips as I wiped a hand across my face. Hold it together. The beam danced wildly, illuminating only more stone figures in alcoves along the towering walls. No intruder, no lurking shape. Methodically, heart pounding, I checked the doors leading off the hall. Locked, secure, handles pulled, tugged, solid. I scanned the floor for prints. clean this time, reflecting the dull overhead glow like dark water. "Anyone there?" My voice, thin and strained, bounced back unanswered. The remainder of that shift was spent hunched in the security room, counting down the minutes, stomach churning. Every glance at the monitors was laced with dread, anticipating a figure stepping out of the shadows. It never came. Anxiety vibrated through me, my legs jittery beneath the desk. In the ensuing days, I sought refuge in daylight. Arriving early, I'd walk the galleries before twilight fell. Everything appeared benign under the sun's indifferent gaze. The statues were merely stone, their eerie expressions softened. Curators bustled, dust cloths flickered, the mundane rhythm of the museum's waking hours. But nightfall inevitably transformed the space, thickening the silence, sharpening every stray sound into a potential threat. One evening, embarking on the 10 p.m. rounds, past the main entrance, the medieval armor gleaming dully, the silent judgment of painted eyes in the portrait gallery, I paused at the threshold of the sculpture wing. A wide hallway, flanked by smaller artifacts entombed in glass, led into its heart. From within, a faint tap, like knuckles rapping on plaster. I froze, pressing my ear to the shadowed opening. Silence. Stepping inside, I swept the flashlight beam left, then right. Statues flanked me, imposing figures on pedestals, some cordoned by velvet ropes, others unnervingly proximate. I advanced toward the center, pausing intermittently, my own shoe soles squeaking offensively on the polished floor. Then, a sudden, localized chill brushed the nape of my neck. Not a draft, no vents nearby. I whirled, flashlight raised defensively, expecting a face inches from my own. Nothing. Only empty space where the cold patch lingered on my skin, raising involuntary shivers. I compelled myself onward, examining each statue with forced diligence, base, label, posture. My memory, honed by recent vigilance, searched for discrepancies. Most stood immutable. Then I reached a centerpiece, a robed figure, one arm outstretched in dramatic gesture. Something was wrong. That arm. It seemed higher, angled more acutely than I recalled. Kneeling, I rested the flashlight on the floor, aiming its beam upward. I stared, comparing the current pose to the image etched in my mind. A tightness gripped my chest. It was higher. Subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably different. Leaning closer, my fingers brushed the cold stone. An intense, unnatural chill radiated from it, racing up my arm. I snatched my hand back as if burned. Simultaneously, my radio crackled, spitting static. I nearly cried out, fumbling at my belt. "Elias here, go ahead." Only more static answered, then silence. Clipping it back, I rose, struggling to regulate my ragged breathing. Clammy hands, pounding heart. I scanned the vicinity for tools, any sign of tampering. Nothing. I exited the wing, checking doors along the adjacent corridor with trembling hands. All secure. It was then I resolved to document everything. An old logbook unearthed in the security office became my confidant. After each round, religiously, I recorded the anomalies. The phantom footprints, the shifting statues, the disembodied sounds, the pervasive sense of unease. Timestamps accompanied each entry, cross-referenced with camera logs. 02. Heavy breathing felt close behind near Greek Heracles. Turned, nothing. Noticed new microchips on pedestal. Another night. 3 distinct sets of prints near Roman busts. Vanished approx. 10 FT from entrance. I considered mentioning it to one of the day guards, perhaps Alistair, but the words caught in my throat. His likely reaction, a shrug, a joke about graveyard shift jitters, felt more isolating than the silence. Embarrassment warred with a growing certainty. I kept writing, each entry a small testament against encroaching madness. One night, near 3 a.m., cycling through camera views, my attention snagged on the North Corridor feed, a flicker right at the screen's edge. Leaning closer, adjusting the view, my heart seized. It was a statue's head, a carved nobleman in repose, turning fractionally, a slow, deliberate nod. Before I could fully process it, the feed dissolved into static snow, then blackness. Cursing under my breath, I wrapped the monitor's casing. It flickered back to life. The statue was precisely as it should be. I rewound the recording. The glitch occurred at the exact same instant, erasing the impossible movement. A glacial cold seeped into my veins. Frustration and a deeper unease churned within me. Shoving back from the desk, I grabbed my light and headed directly to that corridor. The statue stood sentinel, impassive under the humming fluorescent tubes. The air felt heavy, cold. I approached the nobleman figure, circling it, scrutinizing the base, the pedestal, the identifying tag. Nothing amiss. Yet the pressure in my chest intensified, as if I'd been holding my breath too long. Exhaling shakily, I leaned in close to the marble face. Its vacant eyes stared into the distance. But was that subtle tilt, that slight inclination of the chin, always there? My pulse surged anew. Fumbling for my phone, I tried to capture evidence, proof for my own sanity. The camera refused to focus. The image on the small screen swam, blurring, the lens hunting endlessly. 3 attempts yielded 3 distorted, useless images. Wiping the lens on my shirt made no difference. Shoving the phone back into my pocket, I turned away, every nerve ending alight, the pulse in my neck a frantic hammer. I retreated to the security room, utterly drained. The nights since have followed this pattern. The solitary patrol punctuated by steps that are not mine, by breaths of cold air on my skin, by footprints materializing from nowhere and vanishing into nothing. Pedestals shifted by infinitesimal degrees, dust and stone chips appearing inexplicably beneath immobile figures. No concrete apparition, never a tangible intruder, just this suffocating presence, always hovering at the periphery just beyond the beam of my light. My palms sweat constantly, my throat is perpetually dry. A permanent tension resides between my shoulder blades. Rationality whispers explanations, settling foundations, drafts, overwrought nerves, but the whispers are drowned out by the chilling conviction that these stone effigies stir when darkness provides cover. The footprints, the breathing, the radio's sudden silences, they weave a narrative I cannot decipher but instinctively fear. Tonight, as I scrawl this entry, the faint cadence of steps echoes from the adjacent gallery. My heart pounds against my ribs like a trapped bird. The flashlight lies heavy on the desk, its potential comfort momentarily outweighed by a paralyzing dread. Stay here, pretend ignorance, or venture out. But the job demands vigilance. Fear cannot be my master. I will take the light. I will walk back into that hall. I will see which silent sentinel has decided to shift its gaze tonight. What awaits me remains terrifyingly unknown. My stomach is a knot of ice, my palms are slick, but I must go. If the breathing returns, I will face it. If prints appear, I will follow. I need to know, prankster or presence, human mischief or something far older, far stranger. I am standing now. The security room door clicks softly open behind me. My breath catches, my forehead is damp. Into the corridor. An overhead light flickers, falters, steadies. Faulty wiring. I insist silently, forcing one foot before the other. My phone, displaying the camera app, shows only a loading icon. Weak signal here. My nerves hum like overloaded circuits. The steps are clearer now, echoing from the direction of the sculpture hall. A difficult swallow. I raise the flashlight, its beam cutting a trembling path through the gloom. Ahead, did a shadow just retract behind a marble base? Real? Imagined? The pounding in my chest drowns thought. There is no retreat now. Dawn is hours away. Duty binds me here. And this I cannot leave alone any longer. The navigation system offered a saccharine chime, a digital pronouncement of arrival. Through the bug-spattered windscreen, Elias gazed upon a hamlet bearing absolutely no resemblance to Ashford. A weathered plank declared this place Harmony Gulch, population 71, though the numerals themselves seemed fossilized, untouched by the passage of years, perhaps decades. Hours he'd driven, charting a course toward his cousin's nuptials in Ashford, a journey promised as a straightforward highway affair. Yet somewhere amidst the monotonous miles, his ordinarily infallible guidance system had woven a path far from the intended trajectory. Now, with the sun bleeding across the horizon in strokes of bruised purple and feverish crimson, he found himself marooned in a pocket of existence seemingly bypassed by the march of time. Harmony Gulch's primary thoroughfare unspooled before him, flanked by edifices whispering of the mid-20th century, anomalies in the present day. Neon tubes sputtered erratically within shop fronts, casting a sickly luminescence. The scant figures populating the sidewalks ambled with a peculiar, dragging motion that sent prickles of unease chasing up Elias's spine. He guided the car to the curb, retrieving his phone, hoping for technological salvation. Predictably, no service. A weary exhalation escaped him. Directions would have to be procured through the archaic method of human inquiry. Directly opposite stood a diner, its streamlined chrome facade reflecting the dying light with a tarnished sheen. A buzzing sign above the entrance advertised the Serenity Spoon, finest victuals this side of nowhere. Seemed the logical starting point. Elias pushed open the car door, the day's accumulated humidity instantly embracing him like a damp shroud. As he crossed the asphalt, a distinct sensation crawled over the nape of his neck. The few townsfolk visible had ceased their shuffling progress. They were watching him, their gazes unnervingly direct, pupils dilated and static. He hastened his steps, shoving the diner door inward with perhaps more force than strictly required. A discordant jangle erupted from the bell mounted overhead, instantly capturing the attention of every soul within, and, truly, every soul. Heads swiveled with a chilling, mechanical synchronicity, fixing upon him. Faces remained impassive, eyes vacant, glazed over like porcelain dolls. For a protracted moment, the sole sound was the faint, staticky sigh of a wireless radio emitting the brassy strains of some forgotten swing tune, redolent of wartime broadcasts. Elias cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "Excuse me," he began, voice tight. "I seem to have taken a wrong turn. Could anyone perhaps direct me towards Ashford?" A profound silence answered him. Then, with the slowness of thawing ice, conversations gradually reignited, chatter resuming as though he were utterly invisible, his query unheard. Patrons returned their attention to plates, cutlery moving with a metronomic, almost robotic rhythm. A waitress materialized at his side, causing him to flinch violently. Her embroidered name tag read Agnes. Her smile stretched fractionally too wide across her face, a rictus that failed to reach her eyes. "Well now, sugar, you've strayed quite a ways from Ashford," she crooned, her voice thick and sweet as molasses. "Why don't you slide into a booth? Have yourself a slice of our pie while we sort out getting you back on your proper road?" Every nerve ending shrieked a warning. Flee. Get back in the car. Drive until this place is nothing but a bad memory. Yet, something within Agnes's stare anchored him. Not warmth, not precisely, but a peculiar intensity, akin to appetite. Before his own volition could fully engage, he found himself ensconced in a vinyl booth, a wedge of deep ruby pie resting before him on the formica tabletop. A dish he certainly hadn't requested. Agnes lingered nearby, that unnervingly broad smile still fixed upon her features. "Go on now, sugar," she coaxed. "Help clear your head." He lifted the fork, more to placate her than from desire. The pie's filling possessed a viscous gleam that evoked unsettling images of something freshly spilled and vital. He ventured a minuscule bite. Instantly, his senses detonated. It transcended mere deliciousness, a symphony of sweetness and tang, a profound richness that defied earthly possibility. He found his fork moving again, then again, powerless against the confection's siren call. As he consumed the pie, the diner's reality seemed to undulate, its edges blurring softly. The patrons' movements acquired a newfound fluidity, their gestures less stilted, more organic. The radio music sharpened, coalescing into a melody that tickled the edges of his recognition. Even Agnes's smile appeared to soften, losing some of its rigid, painted-on quality. "There now. Better, isn't it?" she murmured, slipping smoothly into the seat opposite him. "So, tell me, what errand brings you wandering into our little haven?" Elias blinked, struggling to recall. His purpose here? Something concerning a wedding. But the thought felt distant, unimportant now. I can't rightly say," he confessed, the words surprising him. Agnes patted his hand, her touch sending a peculiar galvanic current up his arm. "That's perfectly fine, sugar. Many folks find their way here feeling a bit adrift. Harmony Gulch has a knack for calling to those who need settling." He nodded, a strange solace blooming within him at her words. The pie plate was empty, though he had no memory of finishing the last bite. Outside, darkness had fully descended, the street now bathed in the amber glow of quaint, old-fashioned lampposts. "Let me show you to the inn," Agnes suggested softly. "You look plumb tuckered out." He rose and followed her out of the diner, his legs seeming to operate independently of his conscious mind. The street outside hummed with the gentle nocturnal activity now, couples strolling, neighbors chatting amiably. They all offered smiles and nods as he passed, greetings imbued with an unnerving familiarity, as if welcoming a long-expected arrival. The inn itself was a grand, slightly faded Victorian structure, its ornate architecture contrasting sharply with the simpler buildings nearby. Climbing the porch steps, a wave of vertigo washed over him. Agnes steadied him with a firm hand on his elbow, her touch simultaneously reassuring and deeply disquieting. "Don't you fret," she murmured, her voice seeming to echo from a great distance. "Everyone feels a tad peculiar at first. You'll settle right in soon enough." The lobby swam before his eyes, a kaleidoscope of dark polished wood and plush crimson velvet. He retained a hazy recollection of signing a ledger, of a heavy, ornate brass key being pressed into his palm. Then he was within a room, the elaborate floral wallpaper seeming to writhe and coil just beyond his direct gaze. He collapsed onto the bed, his thoughts spinning like a runaway carousel. As oblivion claimed him, he heard Agnes's voice one final time, though she was nowhere visible in the shadowed room. "Welcome to Harmony Gulch, sugar. You're finally home." He awoke with a jolt, sunlight slicing through intricate lace curtains he didn't recognize. For a disoriented moment, location and circumstance eluded him entirely. Then memories cascaded back, the errant turn, the peculiar town, Agnes's diner, the pie. He pushed himself upright, his head throbbing dully. The room enveloped him like a meticulously crafted stage set, antique furnishings, faded elegance, yet imbued with an indefinable sense of artifice, unconvincing upon close inspection. Stumbling towards the window, he drew back the lace. The street below bustled, but the scene was profoundly wrong. Automobiles from the 1950s glided past, their chrome fins catching the morning light. Women in voluminous skirts and men sporting fedoras promenaded along the pavement. The entire town appeared trapped within a temporal bubble. His phone. He needed to call out, to summon help. He fumbled at his pockets, finding them empty. Then a chilling realization dawned. He wasn't wearing his own clothes. Instead, he was clad in a button-down shirt and high-waisted trousers that looked sourced directly from a vintage haberdashery. A sharp rap sounded at the door. "Room service!" Agnes's voice trilled, unbearably cheerful. He opened the door warily. Agnes stood there, expertly balancing a tray bearing a steaming mug of coffee, and, inevitably, another slice of that damnable pie. "Mornin', sleepyhead," she chirped. "Figured you could use a little something to start your day after that long journey." "What is this?" Elias demanded, his voice rough. "What's happening here? This place? What did you do?" Agnes's smile remained resolute, unwavering. Now, no need for agitation. Harmony Gulch is just particular, a sanctuary for particular folks, those needing a clean slate, wanting to shed their worries, and you, dear heart, looked like you carried more than your fair share. He shook his head, attempting to dispel the persistent fog clouding his mind. "But I didn't want this. I was just passing through. I have to get back. There's a wedding." "A wedding?" Agnes interrupted, her eyes acquiring a sudden, sharp gleam. "Oh, sugar. Is that what has you all twisted up? Well, heavens, why didn't you mention it? We adore weddings here in Harmony Gulch. Matter of fact, I believe old Mr. Hemlock's girl is tying the knot this very weekend. I'm positive they'd be delighted to have you join the festivities." The manner in which she spoke drained the words of any suggestion, leaving only an unspoken imperative. A sliver of ice traced its path down his spine as the true horror of his predicament crystallized. This wasn't merely an odd town, it was a meticulously baited snare, and he had blundered straight into its jaws. I believe I'd like to leave now," he stated, striving to keep the tremor from his voice. Agnes's smile curdled into something resembling pity. "Oh, sugar, don't you understand yet? Nobody ever truly leaves Harmony Gulch. But you mustn't worry. You'll grow fond of it here. We all do, eventually." As if summoned by her words, a small contingent of townspeople materialized in the hallway behind her. Their smiles were carbon copies of Agnes's, their eyes reflecting that same strange, acquisitive light he'd noted the previous evening. "Why don't you come on downstairs?" Agnes proposed, extending her hand towards him. "Meet everyone proper. After all, we're your family now." He wanted to recoil, to bolt, to unleash a primal scream. But as Agnes's fingers enveloped his, that same peculiar jolt surged through him, silencing his panic. Suddenly, the prospect didn't seem quite so dreadful. Wasn't this, in some fractured way, what he had yearned for? A place to belong? A life stripped bare of modern complexities and anxieties? As Agnes guided him down the staircase, the other townspeople fallen into step behind them like figures in some solemn, uncanny procession, he felt the last vestiges of his resistance dissolve. Harmony Gulch hadn't been his destination, no, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was where he was irrevocably meant to arrive. Outside, the sun blazed brightly, the street vibrated with the cheerful energy of a perfect, bygone afternoon, and as he stepped out onto the pavement, hand clasped firmly in Agnes's, joining his newfound family, he found he couldn't quite summon the reason why he had ever entertained the notion of leaving. The low thrum of unseen energies vibrated through the soles of my boots, the sole companion in corridors swallowed by calculated shadows. 2 a.m. Omnigene Corp breathed differently after dark, a sterile behemoth holding its technological breath. Months I'd walked these halls, Elias, the night shift custodian, a ghost polishing the gleaming surfaces of ambition. But tonight, the silence felt taut, stretched thin over something unseen, unheard. The mundane rhythm of my existence was poised, unknowingly, on the precipice of a plunge into corporate shadows and secrets sharp enough to draw blood. My purpose here was simple, stark. Ilara, my sister, and the mountain of bills her illness accrued. This post, cleaning up after geniuses reshaping life itself, offered more than just wages. It demanded silence, sealed by contracts thick with consequence. Omnigene guarded its genetic frontiers with the ferocity of a dragon on its hoard. This shift began as any other. Offices aired of stale coffee and ambition, bins emptied of crumpled failures, floors mopped to an obsidian sheen. Then, the third floor, the sanctum sanctorum of research, and there, a violation of the sterile order, the main lab door unlatched, bleeding weak light into the hallway's gloom. A forgotten monitor, perhaps. A careless researcher. Curiosity, cold and sharp, nudged me forward. I eased the heavy door wider. Ice flooded my veins, not scientists. Two shapes, draped in darkness, hunched like carrion birds over a glowing terminal, fingers blurring across the keyboard, siphoning data onto a slim, dark drive. Ski masks rendered them featureless, their intent starkly, terrifyingly clear. A gasp, involuntary, escaped my lips. Heads snapped up. Two pairs of eyes, holes in the fabric, locked onto mine. A frozen tableau, hunter, hunted, witness, shattered in an instant. One lunged, a predator unleashed, while the other scrambled to secure their digital plunder. I staggered back, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Security. The alarm panel pulsed red at the far end of the hall, an eternity away. I pivoted, launched myself into a desperate sprint, my own heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Heavy impacts hammered the polished floor behind me, gaining. My fingers stretched, aching for the smooth plastic of the alarm. Talons of fabric bunched my collar, yanking me off my feet. The world tilted, slammed hard against my back, stealing the air from my lungs. I lay gasping, staring up into the void of a mask, eyes glinting like chips of obsidian. "You shouldn't be here," grated a voice like rusted iron. "Problem." Raw terror, primal and consuming, surged through me. Not petty theft, espionage, and I, Elias, the janitor, was a loose thread dangling dangerously. Instinct screamed. I kicked wildly, connecting with a knee. A grunt, a stumble backward, a sliver of opportunity. I scrambled, lunged, slammed my palm against the alarm. The corridor erupted in a piercing electronic shriek. Curses spat from behind the masks, followed by the rapid tattoo of retreating footsteps. But safety was still an illusion. Hide. A supply closet nearby offered refuge. I squeezed between shelves laden with chemical scents and cleaning tools, making myself small, praying my hammering heart wouldn't betray me. Seconds bled into centuries, measured by the relentless wail of the alarm. Then shouts, the thud of boots, security, finally. A shaky breath escaped me. The immediate danger had passed. Or so I believed. Stepping cautiously from the closet, a hand, rough and insistent, clamped over my mouth. I was wrenched backward, dragged into the sterile quiet of an empty office, masked face inches from mine. "Listen," the hiss was venomous. "You saw someone, running away, couldn't see who, got it?" Fear was a physical chokehold. I nodded mutely. Good. The pressure eased slightly, but the threat remained, cold and precise. Because we know things. Your sister, Alara. Don't test us. A hard shove sent me stumbling back into the hallway, just as uniformed guards rounded the corner, guns drawn but lowering slightly at the sight of me. I fed them the fabricated story, each word tasting like ash, my voice a trembling reed. They seemed to accept it, relief warring with professional suspicion, thanking me for triggering the alarm before asking for a formal statement later. Watching them sweep the corridors, guilt and terror churned within me. What darkness had I just been swallowed by? The remainder of my shift was a hollow pantomime. My hands performed their familiar tasks, but my mind replayed the encounter, the threat, the cold eyes. What secrets resided on that stolen drive? How deep did this rot go that they knew about Alara? What awaited me if the truth surfaced? Home offered no solace. Taped to my door, a stark white note. Remember, not a word. Days dissolved into a fever dream of paranoia. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every passing car held unseen watchers. I gave my official statement, weaving the lies into the company record, hating the reflection of the coward I saw in the polished security desk. But the investigation itself felt wrong. Key card logs showed impossible entries. Surveillance footage from critical angles vanished into digital ether. A cover-up, clumsy yet effective, orchestrated from within. This gnawing unease, the certainty of being entangled in something vast and dangerous, pushed me beyond fear. I began to listen, truly listen, to the hushed, stressed tones drifting from labs, the arguments half swallowed by closing doors. It was near the cryo-storage units I heard it. Two senior researchers, voices low and strained, debating the morality of their crown jewel, Project Chimera. "It's hubris, Eris," one whispered fiercely. "We're not just mapping God's work. We're trying to redraw the blueprint. If this leaks, the ethical fallout will make cloning look like a playground squabble," the other, Dr. Eris Thorne, finished grimly. The dense, scientific terminology flew over my head, but the core resonated with chilling clarity. Omnigene wasn't just curing diseases. They were flirting with forces best left undisturbed. And someone was willing to steal, perhaps kill, for that power. The choice loomed. Retreat into silence, pray the storm passed over me and Alara, or chase the truth down its perilous rabbit hole. The decision was wrested from my hands. Arriving for my next shift, I found the third-floor lab transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. Acrid smoke hung heavy. A targeted fire had consumed vital research notes, irreplaceable samples. Amidst the debris, I overheard the CEO, his voice tight with fury, speaking to the head of security. "No accident," he clipped out. "Someone wants Chimera stopped or stolen. Find them. Use any means necessary." The stakes, I realized with the sickening lurch, were astronomical. This transcended corporate theft. It was about the future, about control, and my life was squarely in the crosshairs. I shed the janitor's invisibility cloak and became a nocturnal detective. My access was my skeleton key. After hours, I slipped into offices, piecing together fragmented emails, discarded notes, whispered rumors. Project Chimera, a revolutionary gene therapy, capable of eradicating hereditary afflictions, but also, chillingly, of enhancing human capabilities far beyond the natural. A potential miracle, a potential weapon. The deeper I dug, the thinner the ice beneath my feet became. The feeling of being watched intensified, coalescing into certainty. Twice, the same nondescript sedan mirrored my route home. Just as the pressure threatened to crush me, a lifeline appeared. Dr. Eris Thorne intercepted me one evening near her lab, her expression etched with conflict. "I know what you saw, Elias," She stated quietly, her gaze direct. "And I know you've been looking deeper. You're walking a razor's edge." Thorne confessed her own escalating ethical dread, her suspicion that factions within Omnigene plan to auction Chimera to the highest, most unscrupulous bidder. "I can help you bring it to light," she offered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we must be shadows. They see everything." An unlikely alliance forged in shared peril. Her credentials opened digital doors. My near invisibility allowed physical access. We gathered evidence, encrypted communications, falsified reports, offshore account numbers, a mosaic of corruption. Twice, security patrols nearly stumbled upon us. The danger was a constant, palpable hum. But finally, we held it. A flash drive loaded with enough proof to dismantle the conspiracy. The night we planned our exit, the facility erupted. Alarms screamed, emergency lights painted the corridors in strobing crimson, security forces, reinforced by grim-faced men in dark suits, materialized, flooding the hallways. In the ensuing pandemonium, Thorne and I were separated. I saw my chance, a secondary exit, rarely used. Clutching the flash drive, now feeling like a burning ember in my palm, I plunged into the cool night air. Behind me, sharp cracks echoed. Gunshots. My stomach plummeted. Eris. Had she made it? The following days were a maelstrom of flashing lights, probing questions, ravenous media. The Omnigene scandal detonated. Visionary science twisted by avarice, a conspiracy reaching into the boardroom, the terrifying potential of Project Chimera laid bare. Arrests followed. Executives fell. Omnigene's stock cratered, its future, and that of its monstrous creation, uncertain. Dr. Thorne, recovering from her injuries, was lauded, a reluctant hero cast as whistleblower. And me? A substantial settlement materialized, contingent on my silence regarding certain operational details. Enough to erase Alara's medical debts, enough to build a small, quiet business far from the sterile hum of laboratories. Yet, years later, sleep still offers little refuge. The cold dread of those nights in Omnigene's shadowed heart remains, an indelible stain. I learned that the most ordinary paths can lead to extraordinary precipices, and that choosing conscience over comfort, whatever the price, irrevocably alters the landscape of a life. Liquid percussion hammered the windscreen, a hypnotic rhythm shattered by a frantic blur at the road's edge, a silhouette, bowed and imploring, thumb stark against the deluge. A synapse fired caution, another, quicker impulse, an ingrained reflex to mend, to assist, killed the hesitation. I steered onto the sodden shoulder. The instant the passenger door sighed open, admitting a chill draft and the stranger, I unknowingly veered onto a trajectory steeped in shadow and dread. They call me Elias. A lifetime spent navigating the quiet corridors of empathy, first in my small hometown where neighborly aid was breath itself, then later amidst the sterile urgency of the infirmary, where I tended the frail as a caregiver. Tonight, though, driving the lonely artery home from a protracted shift, under skies weeping violently, that compassion faced an unforeseen crucible. The man who slumped into the adjacent seat was waterlogged, fabric clinging like a second skin to his gaunt architecture. A ragged growth shadowed his jawline, framing deep-socketed eyes that flickered, absorbing the car's interior with unnerving speed before fixing on mine. "Appreciate the stop," he rasped, the sound gravelly yet threaded with relief. "Wouldn't have blamed you for driving on. Weather like this." A tight smile formed on my lips, an attempt at dissolving the tension clinging to him like the rain. "No trouble. Where can I take you?" "Up ahead," he murmured, a study in vagueness. "Not far. I'll point the way." Merging back onto the deserted tarmac, slick and black as obsidian, a disquiet began to coil in my gut. His ambiguity, the restless energy radiating from his damp form, it resonated falsely. Yet I dismissed it. Fatigue, perhaps, an overindulgence in televised dread. We traveled encased in silence, punctuated only by the metronomic sweep of the wipers and the relentless drumming on the roof. I was formulating some innocuous pleasantry when his voice sliced through the quiet. "So, Elias," he uttered, the tone disarmingly conversational. "How's the world been using you?" Ice bloomed in my veins, my grip instinctively tightened on the wheel. My name. I hadn't offered it. Before the question could fully form on my lips, he pressed on, the casual veneer dissolving into something colder, sharper. "Treating you well, I imagine. Comfortable there, in that tidy place on Sycamore Row, with Jasper, your marmalade cat, curled up somewhere warm, yes?" The world tilted. How? How could this sodden phantom possess such intimate coordinates of my existence? "Who are you?" The question emerged, trembling despite my struggle for composure. "How do you know these things?" A low chuckle resonated in the confined space, prickling my skin. "Oh, Elias, I know quite a bit. Been observing you for some time now." My thoughts scrambled, a frantic search for reason. A stalker? But why? To what end? "What is it you want?" I managed, forcing my gaze towards the rain-lashed road as panic threatened to engulf me. "It's not about my wants, Elias," he replied, his voice a chillingly level C. "It's about yours. The ones buried deep, in those corners you pretend aren't there. You're suffocating in the predictability, aren't you? The sameness. That's the real reason you pulled over tonight. A subconscious invitation, hoping for something else." His words struck a discordant chord, uncomfortably true. A recent restlessness, a chafing against the mundane. Yes, I'd felt it. But this intrusion, this calculated menace, this was derangement. "You're mistaken," I countered, injecting a conviction I didn't feel. "I stopped because of the storm. Basic decency, nothing more." He laughed again, the sound seeming to expand, pressing against the windows. "Ah, Elias, ever the altruist, always the righteous gesture. But that narrative is incomplete, isn't it? We both know." My knuckles whitened against the wheel. "I want you out of my car, right now." "That's not possible, I'm afraid," he stated, a serrated edge honing his voice. "Our journey together has only just begun." panic surged, hot and blinding. Escape. I needed to escape. My foot slammed the accelerator, the engine whined, the vehicle surged forward. My eyes darted, desperate for an exit, a sign of life, any sanctuary. "Futile, Elias," he said, calm as the storm's eye. "There's nowhere else. Just this road, just us." He was right. The highway ribboned into infinite, rain-swept darkness, empty, utterly desolate. A sickening realization dawned. I had no bearings, no sense of location. How long had we been driving? Time felt distorted, stretched thin. "What have you done?" The question was barely a breath. "Only what you permitted," came the soft reply. "You let me in, Elias. You opened the door." As if on cue, the engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Momentum carried us onto the shoulder where we coasted to a halt, swallowed by the night. I twisted the key, futilely. Silence, save for the rain. "Impeccable timing," the man observed, that unnerving smile resurfacing. "Shall we adjourn our discussion to the elements?" "I'm not going anywhere with you," I retorted, the bravado paper thin. He sighed, a sound freighted with feigned disappointment. "Elias? Elias? Still resisting? You have no agency here. You never did." He reached across the console. I flinched back, fumbling for the door lock, the handle. Immovable. Sealed. Trapped. "Don't struggle," he advised, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's smoother if you acquiesce." His fingers closed around my forearm. A bizarre Rorschach bloom spread through my perception. The world smeared, colors running like wet paint. His voice seemed to recede, echoing down a long tunnel. "Welcome to the narrative you craved, Elias. Try to enjoy the unfolding." Consciousness returned in my own bed, sunlight striping the room. Disorientation lingered. A dream? Nightmare residue? Then my gaze fell upon the nightstand. My heart seized. A small rectangle of paper rested there, scrawled in unfamiliar script. "Thanks for the lift. See you soon." In the ensuing weeks, I waged war against the memory, labeling it hallucination, a byproduct of burnout. But the certainty that some fundamental axis within me had shifted became undeniable. Phantoms flickered at the periphery of my vision. Him, always him, dissolving when I turned. I fortified my home. New locks, surveillance systems, eventually relocating entirely. Useless gestures. He remained an invisible pressure, a constant observation. And the most insidious part? A sliver of me thrilled to it. The peril, the enigma, it had stirred something dormant, something feral. I found myself gravitating towards risk at the infirmary, seeking the most demanding cases. My quiet routines fractured. I pursued novelty, explored unfamiliar districts after dark. That night, it seemed, had unlocked a chamber within me I hadn't known existed. Yet, this nascent exhilaration was perpetually shadowed by fear. Every passerby held potential menace. Every secure door felt permeable to his will. I existed in a state of hypervigilance, simultaneously dreading and perversely anticipating the next intersection. It arrived, inevitably, on a night mirroring the first. rain-slicked streets, deserted under the sodium glow. Walking home late, I turned onto my new street. And there he was, standing beneath a sputtering lamppost, wearing that same disquieting smile. "Hello, Elias," he greeted my approach. "Prepared for another drive?" Instinct screamed, "Run, call out, flee." Instead, a nod, a confluence of terror and electric anticipation surged through me. As we walked towards his waiting car, dark, anonymous, I recognized the transformation. The Elias of before would have recoiled, fought the undertow. This new iteration, forged in that rain-soaked crucible, leaned into the terrifying unknown. "Where are we headed?" I asked, settling into the passenger seat. The scent of damp wool and something else, something indefinable, filling the air. He grinned, eyes catching the dim light. "Wherever the road dictates, Elias. Are you truly ready for that?" As the engine purred to life and we melted into the downpour, the rain drumming a familiar tattoo overhead, I knew the old coordinates of my life were irrevocably lost. I had swung wide a door onto a landscape of shadows and whispers, of thrilling jeopardy. And though fear remained a cold knot in my stomach, the urge to slam that door shut had vanished. Now, recounting this, certainty itself feels like a luxury I can no longer afford. Am I fracturing, my mind inventing this parasitic presence? Or did I, on that storm-lashed highway, genuinely invite something ancient and predatory into the passenger seat of my soul? I only know that my own senses are suspect. Every unfamiliar face could be his mask. Every threshold feels fragile. Consider this, then, a cautionary signpost. Should you find yourself on a dark road, rain falling like judgment, and see a figure seeking passage, pause, reflect. Because what you welcome in might choose never to leave, and the journey it takes you on may lead far from where you ever intended to go. The memory remains crystalline. That first dawn I beheld the script upon my newly mounted whiteboard. Halting in the threshold, vision swimming momentarily, I registered an alien pressure blooming within my ribs. The penmanship, a frantic, almost desperate scrawl, belonged to no hand I knew. A fact sufficient to make me recoil, swallowing against a sudden tightness. The impulse to summon aid warred with an inexplicable reticence. My phone remained heavy in my pocket. Solitary investigation seemed the only course. Little did I fathom how that single aberrant inscription would unravel into a tapestry of sleepless nights and days steeped in disquiet. Now, sequestered in this office, I strive to decipher the unfolding strangeness, my heart clenching each time my gaze drifts toward that stark white plain. With nowhere else to turn, I commit it all to paper. Weeks prior, I'd installed the thing, a standard, sizable magnetic canvas, envisioning it as a nexus for brainstorming, a ledger for tasks. It commanded the far wall behind my desk, positioned at eye level, readily accessible, a pair of markers resting dutifully on the narrow ledge beneath. A flicker of pride, I recall, for this small bastion of order in my otherwise cluttered workspace. A step, I'd thought, toward discipline. Then came Monday. Unlocking the office, coffee steaming in hand, I entered. The computer's screen was dark, expectedly. My chair remained tucked tight, no sign of intrusion. My eyes, however, were drawn inexorably to the whiteboard. Lines of text spidered across its surface. Not my hand. This script was diminutive, sharp, canted aggressively to the right. Drawing nearer, I deciphered fragments, whispers of shadowed recesses, dim corridors, mentions of tenebrous symbols. My throat constricted, speech deserting me. No forced entry was apparent. The door had been secured. A disbelieving shake of the head, and then, resolve, obliterate it. I seized the eraser, scrubbing until the surface gleamed vacant once more, rubbing thrice, 4 times, ensuring no phantom trace lingered. Retreating to the break room for fortification, more coffee, a moment's calm, I nodded vaguely as colleagues offered morning greetings. The incident felt too bizarre, too personal to share just yet. Better to observe, to wait for recurrence. Upon my return, the board remained immaculate. Relief, fragile but present, bloomed. I roused my computer, plunged into the day's demands. The remainder of Monday passed uneventfully. Tasks completed, meetings attended, the office locked securely around 6. The board stayed blank. Tuesday dawned, and I arrived earlier. The fluorescent lights hummed to life. Instinctively, my gaze shot to the whiteboard, a clenching in my jaw as I advanced. The writing had returned, altered. The characters loomed larger, the words now hinting at archaic chants, at portals best left undisturbed. The pressure in my chest intensified. A tentative brush of fingertips confirmed the ink was fresh, undried. Silence reigned. No sound, no movement betrayed a presence. I scanned the empty corridor beyond my door. The floor was still hushed. This time, my phone emerged. Several photographs captured the unsettling script. Proof, should I need it. Then, again, the erasure. The marker yielded easily, leaving pristine white. Security, I decided, would be my next step if this persisted. The day unfolded without further incident. Lunch consumed at my desk, my attention repeatedly snagged by the blank expanse of the board. It remained stubbornly white. Yet an edginess had taken root. Every minor sound from the hallway, footsteps, a closing door, provoked a jarring swivel in my chair. Passers-by became potential startlements. I began leaving the overhead lights burning even during brief absences, abandoning my usual energy-saving habit for the reassurance of pervasive illumination. The knot of tension tightened in my chest, a dull ache settling in my stomach. Focus fractured, my thoughts straying compulsively toward the silent board. Wednesday evening found me working late, a deadline looming. Around 9, a faint, dry scratching emanated from behind me. The sound of a pen, a marker dragged across a surface, every muscle locked. Slowly, deliberately, I turned. The corner where the board hung lay in partial shadow, the beam from my desk lamp fallen short. Leaning in, squinting, I perceived faint etches materializing on the white plane, lines coalescing into form. A throbbing began in my temples. I slapped the switch for the overhead light. The writing was there, undeniably, but this time I was witnessing its genesis. Stroke by stroke, each letter bloomed into existence, as if guided by an invisible hand pressing marker to surface. No hand was visible, only the lines appearing, the marker itself, previously inert on its ledge, now levitating, its tip skittering across the board with a soft, insistent squeak. My legs turned traitor, trembling. A profound weakness infused my arms. I surged upright, lunging toward the board. My fingers grasped at the marker, but it danced away, continuing its spectral inscription. My heart hammered against my ribs with a force that threatened blackout. The words were a chaotic torrent: hidden catacombs, obscene congregations, forbidden texts. A strangled cry escaped me as I swiped wildly at the animated marker. It clattered to the floor, silenced. The letters ceased mid-formation. I stood, gasping, hands shaken violently, leaning heavily against the desk for support. My gaze fell upon the abruptly terminated text. On the floor, the marker lay still. I scoured the board clean, snatched the offending marker, consigned it to the waste bin, grabbed my bag, and fled the office, computer still running. Home. I needed air, distance. Sleep offered no refuge that night. The scene replayed relentlessly. The disembodied scratching, the self-writing marker, each creak of the floorboards became suspect. My phone lay on the nightstand, a useless talisman. Whom could I tell? A friend? Clergy? The tale felt ludicrous, born of delusion. The following morning, arriving late, a leaden weight settled in my gut as I pushed open the office door. Fresh script defiled the whiteboard. Thicker lines this time, the words invoking dark altars, communion with voices from beyond. A disturbing structure was emerging too. The phrases seemed less random, spaced and aligned with nascent intentionality. Dragging a hand across my face, I felt the dampness of sweat. Building security was summoned. A tall, stoic man named Silas appeared, notepad ready. I spoke of unauthorized entry, displayed the phone's photographic evidence. Together, we reviewed the hallway camera footage. Nothing. No one entering or leaving during the relevant hours. The corridor remained empty on the recordings. My keycard access logs showed only my own entries. Silas offered a perplexed shrug, promising vigilance. That night, I remained again, bathing the office in defiant light, phone clutched, recording app poised. Weariness pressed down, my eyelids heavy, then the familiar grating scritch, scritch from behind. I spun, phone aimed. The marker, airborne once more, danced its unnerving ballet. The phone's screen captured its motion, yet the resulting letters appeared frustratingly blurred in the playback. A distinct chill permeated the air near the board, raising gooseflesh on my arms. Advancing cautiously, the cold intensifying on the back of my neck, I watched new text form, large, bold characters. I am here. My stomach lurched. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. The marker paused beneath the declaration, expectant. Then more words materialized. I will speak. Disbelief warred with terror. Reaching out, my fingertips brushed the marker. A faint, static hum buzzed against my skin, a miniature electrical current. I snatched my hand back, rubbing my fingers together. The marker dropped, rattling against the ledge. Seizing the eraser, I attacked the board with renewed fervor, scrubbing until my arm ached, leaving the surface gleaming. I retreated. The overhead light flickered once, twice, then held steady. My pulse was a frantic drum. It was time to leave. Now. My footsteps echoed unnervingly down the deserted corridor as I practically ran. In the ensuing days, I attempted a facade of normalcy, though exhaustion gnawed and tension coiled perpetually in my shoulders. Seated at my desk, I found myself constantly glancing back. Each morning brought new inscriptions. Sometimes mere repetitions, ritual, chamber, summon, whisper, abyss. Other times, entire paragraphs detailing cryptic locations and sigils. Erasing felt increasingly futile, yet the ritual persisted, a desperate bid to maintain secrecy. At night, the scratching inevitably returned. I took to using only the small desk lamp, hoping to observe the board without casting revealing shadows. My body existed in a state of permanent brace. My lower back screamed, my shoulders were granite, eyes stinging from the strain I'd wait, and the marker would lift, and I would watch, a captive audience as letters bled onto the white surface. The messages grew more pointed, more personal. Listen, obey, respond. Their meaning remained opaque, terrifyingly so. I craved ignorance, yet couldn't tear my focus away. One afternoon, resolve hardened. I would remove the source. The board came away from the wall with the removal of 4 screws, my hands unsteady, sweat beading on my brow wiped away with the sleeve. I carried the cumbersome rectangle to the storage room down the hall, concealed it behind stacked boxes, and returned to my office. A fleeting sense of triumph, of closure. I sank into my chair, staring at the blank wall patch, rubbing damp palms against my trousers. The next morning shattered that illusion. Pinned crudely to the wall where the board had hung was a piece of stiff, white cardboard. Upon it, the same unmistakable script. A frantic check of the hallway revealed only emptiness. Reaching out, I touched the cardboard. It felt unnaturally cold, as if pulled from a deep freeze. The message was chillingly direct. You can't hide. Return. Continue. Nausea surged. I fled to the restroom, splashed water on my face, leaned over the basin, gulping air. Returning moments later, the cardboard was gone. Heart pounding, I strode to the storage room. The whiteboard stood upright against the wall, no longer hidden, emblazoned with fresh, stark writing. Bold letters proclaimed, "You will see." I tugged at my hair, fighting for composure, the acrid taste of bile in my throat. Back in my office, the air felt thick, oppressive. Work was impossible, my thoughts consumed by the entity and its cryptic desires. I anchored myself to physical sensations, the slickness of my palms, the frantic rhythm of my heart, the desert dryness of my mouth. The isolation was profound. Leaving early, I spent the evening pacing my apartment, appetite non-existent, television a meaningless flicker. The phenomenon intensified over the subsequent week. Daily, the messages grew more coherent, evolving into directives, instructions for some obscure ritual, steps, components, nocturnal timings. I refused complicity, barely scanning the words before obliterating them, yet fragments lodged in my mind, references to a hidden locus, a recurring sigil resembling a star with distorted points. Each glimpse sent shivers across my skin, inducing brief mental voids. Relocating my workspace within the office proved useless. At night, the insidious squeaking persisted. Ignoring it only amplified the sound. Stepping into the hall brought silence, but returning to my desk resurrected the scratching. A check of the board always confirmed new text. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. My reflection showed sunken eyes ringed with exhaustion, hands that refused to still. Even sipping water felt fraught, anticipating the inevitable scrape of marker on board. I'd stand, watching the lines form, powerless to do anything but erase. One night, near 11, an abrupt, biting chill saturated the air. My breath plumed faintly. The overhead light stuttered. My desk lamp dimmed. Then, the sound. This time, I walked to the board and simply watched, offering no interference. Word by painstaking word appeared. "Speak to me." I swallowed hard, face flushed, forehead damp. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Tentatively, I reached out, placing my hand flat against the board. A low vibration met my palm, a subtle hum. Leaning closer, hand still pressed to the surface, I watched the marker spell another phrase. "I have waited." My mouth opened, but sound refused to form, my chest painfully tight. The marker detached from its holder, hovering midair before the board. It wrote one final word: "Answer." Pressing harder with both palms, a desperate, futile gesture to repel the unseen force, I felt the vibration surge for an instant before the marker dropped. I gasped, stumbling back. After a long moment, staring at the imperative, I erased it. This would not cease. That knowledge settled, cold and certain. How to end it remained elusive, yet here I remain, night after night, bathed in artificial light, awaiting the marker's stir. The faint squeaks commence. The words manifest. Hidden realms, ancient rites, dark places nameless and terrifying. My hands tremble, my heart riots, but I endure. For now, it is all I can do. I sit, hyper-alert, stomach clenching with each renewed scrape. The messages gain clarity, confidence, almost as if their author grows bolder. The letters are larger now, the commands more direct, centering on me, demanding action. I have not yet complied, but the pressure mounts. My head aches constantly. My eyes burn from staring. When I finally escape, the ghost of that squeaking sound rings in my ears. At home, sleep is a myth. I lie awake, phone clutched, waiting for the dubious relief of morning. This is my reality now. The future is a void. I know only that the messages will continue. Whether there is an end, a limit, I cannot say. But I'm here, confronting the board, despite the crawling skin, the racing heart, breathing deep, wiping away words that seem to sear themselves onto my consciousness, clinging to a shred of control, testing the boundaries. I haven't found them yet. The words keep coming. The board remains. Hiding is impossible. I am trapped within these office walls, alone with this thing that insists on speaking, and I can no longer pretend I do not hear.